Alright guys, we're back with another video to lose sleep over. This episode is another episode on Tartaria. I was really intrigued with the last video and definitely sparked some questions, so let's see if we could find out a little more. That being said, let's dive right into it.
Some people are trying to make the claim that an advanced ancient civilization built great utopian cities all over the world.
If you look at the World's Fair of the early 1900s, there's some really weird around that.
Want to talk about the Chicago World Fair?
They said that they built it for the World Fair, but then after they just tore it all down.
72-year-old structure is being beaten to a pulp as 1,800-pound ball crashes against its ancient but sturdy walls of stone.
Have you looked into the Tartarian stuff at all?
I was watching a video today about it.
So it's suspected that it could have possibly been Tartaria.
That's super strange.
And while they sound totally paranoid, I do want to examine the real historical cover-up that these photos represent. So I enlisted the help of my favorite architectural conspiracy expert, Zach Martise, to help navigate this serious question about our cities and where they come from.
The QAnon of architecture.
Of course.
So Tartarian theory is the idea that thousands of years ago, a world-spanning, hyper-technologically advanced global empire spread throughout the entire world, disseminating basically all pre-modern types of architecture. So particularly with this image, which you see all over Tartarian theories, there's really kind of the grand, oversized scale. Some people believe that the Tartarian Empire was populated by giants, right? So that's why the doorways are so big. That's why the promenade is so wide.
It's time to ask more of our browser. Hey Copilot, adjust all these recipes for 7 guests and combine them into one cooking schedule.
Yeah, we've talked about the doorways being ridiculously big in the last episode.
Particular image, which everyone seems to be so up in arms
By giants, right? So that's why the doorways are so big. That's why the promenade is so wide.
We can start by analyzing exactly what's going on in this particular image, which everyone seems to be so up in arms about. It's taken right here in Chicago, in the South Side area known as Jackson Park. This is what it looks like today. Not quite as impressive as the photos promised. That's because this was taken during the Chicago World's Columbian Exposition, which captivated the Western world from May to October of 1893. The image focuses specifically on the administration building that's sitting in the background, just behind the enormously beautiful Grand Basin. To the left is the agricultural building, which held exhibition spaces for agricultural-like displays. And on the right is the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts building, and it was used for manufacturing demonstrations and things like that. This is just one single view from a full 690 acres of similarly impressive planning. Not only that, the expo brought together the most innovative technology of the time. Inventions like the Ferris wheel and the electrified street lamps, they fascinated Victorian tourists who saw this for the very first time right here. But curiously, the buildings themselves presented a vision for the future that was made of buildings from the past, which I think is a little bit strange. We know about all this because documents and souvenirs survived until today. But sadly, none of the buildings have survived in their original state. Even though they look timeless and everlasting in photographs like the one we just looked at, they were part of a temporary spectacle, a fantasy city crafted to impress visitors who had only really known cities as dirty industrial centers of commerce. So while some of the technology that we have from this fair still lasts until today, none of the buildings do. One of the lesser-known innovations, though, presented here was the pneumatic paint sprayer. This allowed workers to quickly apply paint over large surfaces. Yeah, the White City, this nickname that it earned from all of its gleaming white structures, was only possible because of spray paint. Most people accept this explanation, and of course, the Tartarians, they question it. And I do have to say that I don't believe that these buildings were just here one day and then gone the next.
That spray paint, maybe they just spray painted over all the buildings to make them look newer.
Next either. And in fact, I believe that the ghosts of these buildings, they're responsible for the exact kind of cover-up and the exact kind of destruction that we're worried about happening to the Tartarians. Today, the Tartaria subreddit has over 52,000 members, and Tartarian architecture has 14,000. And every time here the Columbian Exposition comes up, it's pretty much the same thing.
So for most Tartarians, research is being on the internet. It's finding imagery, stringing it together, putting it on YouTube, tossing it on Reddit. Yeah, it's kind of basically the process of any kind of internet-born conspiracy theory.
They argue that it makes no sense that something so beautiful and grand could be just thrown away. Debates flare over its $19 million price tag, which seems exorbitant for just a 6-month installation. That's almost $600 million today. But you know, modern events like the Olympics, they cost billions of dollars. And the Columbian Exposition attracted over 27 million visitors, which is a staggering number for the time. Another point of contention is just how convincing that these buildings are at looking real. But I think that's due to the fact that they were made in a way that we just don't see that much of today. They're made of cast plaster hung over wood scaffolding. If they were permanent, they would have likely been built out of stone, like marble. Marble buildings are made like sculptures. Each piece is carved painstakingly by hand, and then each highly crafted piece is assembled into place. Unlike stone, plaster is light and it's brittle, and it can be cast instead of carved. This allows for really intricate and repeatable designs at a fraction of the cost and the time that it takes to carve it. And that's why we see such elaborate, repetitious ornamentation everywhere in the exposition. Plaster has a totally different economy to it, where the more that you make actually makes it cheaper to do because a single mold can produce dozens and dozens of copies.
That sounds interesting, but when you look at the demolition videos, it doesn't look like they're demolishing plaster.
You can buy a plaster version of priceless Michelangelo's David head right now on Amazon for $20. But at the heart of this, and the reason that we're talking about any of it, is because people feel a certain kind of loss when monumental buildings are demolished. That's what the Tartarian story helps everyone to make sense of. While facts provide clarity in contexts like this, they don't necessarily address how buildings capture our emotions and our imaginations. Folks are concerned that demolition denies a sense of continuity and access to experiencing cultural constructions from our past. There's a sense that we deserve a right to maintain our connections to the cultural aspects of buildings, despite the fact that they're owned as real estate, or they're owned by the government, or the buildings maybe don't even function anymore. That cultural aspect still remains. And when they disappear, it feels like that we're losing a piece of ourselves, or we're losing a piece of our collective memory that we can't access anymore. What seems sacred and enduring all the time about our place is actually revealed to just be pretty fragile, able to be wiped away and then replaced much, much faster and easier than we'd like. The Tartarian believers latch onto this.
If you're tearing down big swaths of the city, that's a big, big project. A lot of people are going to feel burned. They're going to feel outside the system, and that's going to build resentment, and it's going to curdle, and then it might turn into something kind of weird, like Tartaria.
They exaggerate and distort and dramatize this loss of destruction, tapping into our fear that some hidden power is controlling which parts of history that we're allowed to remember. But in many ways, this is exactly what's happened because of the Columbian Exposition, not to it. That, I think, is the big tragic irony here. The architect behind the Columbian Exposition, Daniel Burnham, he was a fantastic salesman. With this spectacular chunk of pop-up urbanity, Burnham presented a vision of urban beauty that fundamentally reshaped expectations of what cities could become. But Burnham didn't use a real city to show us this dream of his. Instead, he built a theme park. And because ever since people have been fooled into believing the theme park could become real, they saw the installation in the photos like this as a proof of concept. So it became a kind of Pinocchio version of architecture in cities. When the wealthy and the politically elite who visited the expo returned home to places like Detroit and Cleveland, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and of course other parts of Chicago, they sought to bring a piece of Burnham's dream home with them. They wanted their cities to be beautiful, just like the fair. And this became known as the City Beautiful movement.
City Beautiful is a pretty incredible moment in the history of architecture and urbanism because it's sort of the moment where urban planning coalesces as a field.
It was fundamentally an attempt to remake American cities in the image of the Exposition by inserting grand boulevards, stately Beaux-Arts structures, plazas, fountains, and parks into our existing cities. That all sounds great, but as you can probably tell, there's a few problems. The first one is pretty obvious. If these existing cities are going to become more beautiful, we need to demolish what's there and make way for these beautiful makeovers. Take the Benjamin Franklin Parkway in Philadelphia, for instance. Today, it looks like this, a majestic boulevard lined with museums and cultural institutions. It's so well organized and the buildings are so grand that it seems like maybe it's always been there. But before it became this, it was a dense urban neighborhood. Over 1,500 homes were cleared. Starting in 1907, so that we could have a place for Rocky to run up and to snarl traffic. Now I'm all for big ideas, and I know that ambitious projects come with significant costs to existing communities. So let's focus just on the design parts of this for a minute. When an area of a city grows over time, most of it's not pre-planned or controlled. There are all sorts of strange little details and things that pop up, and things that maybe just don't make all that much sense, but give it a lot of character. And with this, in these pre-1900 cities, developed a sort of human scale that you can see in this part that was eventually removed. But projects like the Franklin Parkway are planned from the top down, and they can never have the kinds of character of what it replaced. It just can't. The moves are too big, and they come all at once. So to compensate, these grand plans dress up the buildings inside of them as a substitute for the character that had developed there organically. Sure, these new buildings are well built, and they have all kinds of pretty ornamentation and craftsmanship, but these are being imposed onto this place. And to do that, it had to erase what was there before. The Tartarians believe that buildings like this, and maybe even this exact building, come from a distant and mysterious culture. And in reality, for people in Philadelphia, they do come from another distant culture. But their origins, they're not mysterious at all. In reality, the model that the Columbian Exposition and the City Beautiful makeovers, the model that they're emulating, it comes from France during the Second Empire. In fact, the aesthetic category of beautiful, just as a category of landscapes, comes from there too. You can think about the exquisitely manicured gardens of Versailles and Louis XIV. When it comes to cities, we can look to Paris as the original model from which Daniel Burnham was inspired or copied. You can see some pretty obvious similarities in the axial alignments of monuments and the types of architecture that are here. And while the origins aren't mysterious at all, how they were translated and how they were applied to American cities, I think deserves a
Hope he starts talking about the maps and the books, because what about that? There's been maps that show Tartaria, and definitely books that exist well before the 50s.
hard look. At the time of the Columbian Exposition, Daniel Burnham had actually never been to Europe. So he strategically hired plenty of architects who trained in Paris at a special school called the École des Beaux-Arts. Their training allowed them to make pretty convincing replicas of what you'd find around Paris at the time. The designer of the Benjamin Franklin Parkway in Philadelphia, for instance, trained there, and it's where Edward Bennett went to school. Bennett was the co-author of the 1909 plan for Chicago with none other than Daniel Burnham himself. That 1909 plan, which you might have seen pictures of from before, is the City Beautiful movement's attempt to turn Chicago into what was called the Paris of the Prairie. The comparison between the two cities is pretty clear.
You're making the city much more legible, kind of more sequential, more readable.
The other thing not talked about is the below ground level of buildings that was uncovered after construction was done to some of these places. Kind of talked about that in the last video. Alright, hopefully this is a quick ad. Nice.
So my question is, why are Americans so eager to make their cities more like Paris? Sure, it's a beautiful city, but all the parts that we're trying to copy were maliciously carved into the city by a power-hungry emperor trying to show off his power. Napoleon III ordered engineer George Haussmann to replan the city to make it impossible for citizens to take it back from the emperor. Unlike Americans who were sold that this beauty would enrich everyone's lives, the Parisian beauty was imposed on the city as a weapon to manage and control the people of it. The wide boulevards made it harder for rebels to erect barricades and easier for troops to move through, making military rule of the city possible. Then the emperor lined those boulevards with endless rows of Beaux-Arts style or Second Empire style buildings. Not only did this provide visual order to the chaotic city, it brought people in line too, like literally. And that's the dream that we were sold by Daniel Burnham. Critics of the City Beautiful movement called it an architectural cult.
The adoption of City Beautiful was a pretty obvious ploy to instill obedience and discipline in the citizenry.
This theme park convinced us to demolish our cities, to make way for displays of beauty taken from a tyrant. So in the end, the Tartarian believers, they're totally right. Except the buildings that they are worried about losing are the exact ones that actually took their buildings in the first place and are the ones that are trying to control them. They're worried about a powerful entity denying access to history, but the reality is that we've been duped into believing a fake history all along through architecture. So skeptics, they have a point. Our cities are constantly being reshaped, but we should not fall prey to equating architectural style with permanence or authenticity. There's a real opportunity here to appreciate and preserve our architectural heritage, and I'm excited that people are getting excited about it. But don't be fooled into thinking that a building with columns and gilded domes are timeless. It might just be a cheap plaster knockoff. You're a details person. You check at least a half a dozen reviews before making any big ticket purchase. You read the nutritional information on cereal boxes, and one time you even read the terms and conditions for an app that you almost downloaded. So when you're giving to charity, check out GiveWell, an independent resource for rigorous, transparent research about great giving opportunities. Their recent analysis of the effects of cash transfers in poor regions of Africa contains over 300 footnotes, which might satisfy even the most meticulous readers. And it's why the Boston Globe called GiveWell the gold standard for giving. GiveWell has now spent 17 years researching philanthropic opportunities and directs funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities that they've found. For instance, hundreds of thousands of people, mostly children under the age of 5, die every year from malaria. It only takes $5 to supply a child with a net that goes around their bed and protects them from deadly insect bites while they sleep. This is the kind of high-yield solution that you can find and support through GiveWell. When you donate, you're joining over 125,000 donors that used GiveWell to donate more than $2 billion overall. Rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 200,000 lives. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high-impact giving. You can find all of their research and recommendations on their site for free. You can make tax-deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell doesn't even take a cut. If you've never used GiveWell before to donate, you can have your donation matched up to $100 before the end of the year or as long as the matching funds last. To claim your match, go to givewell.org and pick YouTube and then enter Stuart Hicks at checkout. Make sure that they know that you heard about GiveWell from Stuart Hicks to get your donation matched. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or to find out more. See you over there, and as always, thanks for watching.
All right. I don't know. I still feel like plaster. I don't know. Like I said, there's books that exist. I definitely have a couple of Tartaria books that I'm gonna pull out on this channel soon. But what do you guys think? Thank you guys for stopping by and come visit us for the next one.